Hey everybody, Brad Linder back at you again with the Savage Dragon. Now, I'm going to be touching this one up just a little bit because I just finished inking this really quick and I didn't touch on it quite as much as I wanted to with all the other stuff I had going on because of the fact that I was doing page work today. Page work! Comics, comics, comics. So, with that said, all goofiness aside, I'm going to be sharing this with the page real quick and the YouTube channel so we can get started on it. And we're going to bounce it out and get this sucker colored up and finished up and on to the next one. Bear with me just a second so everybody on the page can get into this. And there we go. Now, cool. Okay, I'm going to start out with a super light lime green. And I want to do this one first because I want to come in really, really soft with this. And I may go a little bit brighter. I'm checking whether I want to use the neon first or not. Yeah, this is the one I want to go with for sure. Okay. I'm going to be coloring this one, so I'm going to go with his arms first. What I've got going on is some ripped action here, like he's battle torn, which I love those Eric Larson covers when he shows up and he's just been roughed up 10 ways from Sunday. And 9 times out of 10, you see the muscles in place like I keep wanting to say the wrestling thing. That's the best reference I can give when Eric draws something and he does battle damage. It makes it look like a wrestler kind of thing because the first thing to go is the chest is going to show out right after the arms. He always goes for the arms first. And, it's normally gauntlet style with the sleeves, the cuffs of the shirt down here on the wrist like this, shredded up. So that's why we get that kind of action going on. And I really dig it. I'm a huge Eric Larson fan. I know a lot of people aren't. And that's okay too. But I really like to mimic a lot of his action stuff because that was something I studied for a long time when I got into comics, and I was like, okay, the 90s are shifting everything. It's getting more cinematic and artistic, and I want to find out what's going on because it was getting more graphic driven, for lack of a better term. And comics have always had great imaging and imagery and, composition and all of that, but something about the 90s made it move from the traditional comic style into more of a graphic-driven comic base. Now, everybody credits Todd McFarlane for that because he was a graphic designer when he was working on Spider-Man, and he wanted to make Spider-Man look as heavy as possible in a lot of that stuff and dramatic. And we've talked about that before on other cards and stuff going on and whatnot. And sorry, I had something in front of my face here. Yeah, it was always high end. Okay. Now, I always found it very, very dramatic, and it was overpowered as far as Todd goes, which like I said, I've talked about that before. I love his stuff. But what I'm talking about specifically is the animation level and the creativity of cartoons and what you see in Saturday morning cartoons, films, and movie level quality graphic design came in to comics, because prior to that they had that 70s 80s look. They moved from golden age into silver age, and the silver age pretty much stuck around until the 90s when these designs came out, to where they started getting more heavy artistically driven as far as pop culture went, rather than going into the traditional comic style. Because before 1989, you really couldn't get into comics if you had a heavy graphic style. They called you a graffiti artist or a street artist, and they wouldn't let you have as much pull. Granted, innovators like Jack Kirby and people like that, they came in and they really got a lot of this stuff going. Neil Adams was a huge influence on that, of giving, the late 70s, early 80s Batman stuff the Dark Knight type of look. And then, you had Frank Miller, which came in with a grittier style. but that clean, in-your-face animated style or cartoon style, came in and with the image books, and that's when we got that really big kick in the face that everybody was waiting for with these comics. And I always followed Eric Larson as the guy that came in and made everything jump, because that was his keen goal on everything. He would come up and just go, okay, I want to draw Spider-Man, and Spider-Man was like off the page 3 times bigger in a 3-dimensional effect on a 2-dimensional page, which he was really one of the pioneers of doing that in modern comics. A lot of people say, well, this artist draws really well and this artist draws really well. What I'm talking about is specifically for a comic cartoony style of popping the characters off the page and making them look realistic or 3-dimensional. And he adds a huge depth to his stuff. And even if you don't agree, that's cool too, but there's a depth to it, plain and simple. The backgrounds are really small, and they have a different line weight to them. They have a different look to them. And a lot of people have tried to emulate that since, and it doesn't happen. It just does not happen. So many have tried. I don't necessarily go after his style. I'm one of those artists that likes to do case studies on stuff and find out what I like about it, take that little tidbit and add it into my style, so I don't steal or clone anybody's work, because I hate that. But and if you do that and that's your thing, that's awesome. If you feel you're the next Todd McFarlane because you've taken Todd's work, then hey, cool, more power to you. But for me, it's all about having my own voice and making my own comics and my own art. And what I took about Eric's stuff is part of my clean line animation and animated or cartoony style comes from my influences of Eric Larson. That's a huge impact on me. He didn't get my attention so much with his storytelling, because his stories are pretty much blunt. And don't get me wrong, Eric's a great guy, and I love the Savage Dragon work, but the comic is one note, as far as the story goes. And he knows that too, and he'll tell you flat out. It's one of those things where he tells a comic a good guy against a bad guy, and it stops right there. But when you get into his character work and his artwork, it's so over the top you can't really pass it. You know what I mean? If you're a true comics fan, you can't really overlook it without taking note of Eric Larson, because of the drive and the positioning that he has with his stuff. And I take great influence in that and from that because of that situation. So, a lot of people squawk about, hey, I don't like Eric Larson, he, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to get a lighter blue here. But it's the truth of the matter. Eric's stuff is phenomenal. And if you disagree, that's cool. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But what I like to look at is not what most people will go after. I like to look at high-end stuff and contrasting work, because who can say that you get influenced by J. Scott Campbell? Jay's a great guy. Jeff is awesome. I watch his YouTube videos and stuff whenever he comes on. He does awesome work. Still a huge fan of his sketchbooks and covers and all that. But he primarily does covers now, because that's what he makes his money as. But if he comes back into comics, I'll pay more attention to him. But as of right now, though, he's mostly doing comic work in covers. So you got to take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt, because he puts so much more time and effort into those covers as he would a comic book going, monthly on page to page. So you got to consider the quality and value of what you're getting in comparison by the time and effort that he's putting into the work. Because everybody's like, well, J. Scott Campbell's the best. And I'm like, J. Scott Campbell knows that he's putting out great work because he's limited to whatever he's doing. So keep that in mind. But and I'm not knocking him by any means. I think he's a great artist and a great talent to comics, and he brought in his Disney, animation background and all that good stuff to everything that he does, which is phenomenal. But in turn, a lot of people mistake that as him putting in I don't know how much he puts in, and I'm not going to assume. I'm just throwing out random numbers here. You know, putting in 10 hours on a page or 20 hours on a page for a cover, where most people put in, you know, a 6 to 8 hour day and get it done and get out. There's going to be a quality difference, you know. There's definitely going to be a quality difference. And that's one of the things you have to take into consideration when you're studying this stuff. Like Eric goes in and knocks out a page a day and just tears it up, man. He might do a page and a half a day, and he crushes it because it's always going to be fun. It's always going to be open, and it's always going to jump off the page at you. And yes, I am coloring this shirt like it was cut off here. So I know his shoulder. People are going to be like, your shoulder's not. No, I did that on purpose because I want that shirt to look like it got ripped. But anyway, with everything going on, I still see Erik Larson as being one of the most dynamic artists in the industry because of the fact that, you know, the dude makes his stuff pop up. And whether you like his style or not, you know, he gets extreme with it and goes out in left field to where, you know, he draws the big feet and the big heads and the big hands. But proportions aside and proportion choices aside, the dude still is a great visual storyteller. And, you know, like Jim Lee has really clean lines and everybody loves his work. Well, you know, Jim says he puts, you know, 10, 15 hours a day into each page at the pages he draws now because they have so much detail to them, which I totally understand because he has a lean for a photorealistic style now because he's gotten away from his comic book style and gotten more into a heavy photorealism level with his Batman stuff that is totally different. And then you have somebody like Greg Capullo that comes in, and he's got a very abstract, tiny line style that's very open and color dependent. And he did that so that he could draw faster to keep the contracts that he has with DC. And he's openly said that. He modified his style so he could draw faster. And if you look at his stuff in the Batman books that he has, in comparison to the stuff that he has from all the years he did Spawn, totally different style. Totally different. Not even closely reminiscent to his style. He's gone completely overboard with a different direction. And that's cool. You know, a lot of artists do that. And it's part of the evolutionary process. But getting back to the point of, you know, style in Eric's case, the thing that I like about him is his stuff is so over the top. It doesn't matter if it's a one-note story in regards to his stuff because you're still going to be entertained by it, even though it is as limited as it is. Does that make sense? I hope so. You guys can comment on that as you see this and let me know what you think. But, you know, I'm definitely game to discuss it. But just keep your comments clean and on point and nice. Please don't get nasty because I will delete them if you get rude. But I have zero tolerance for that because I have young students that watch this. So keep it clean. But yeah, I have no problem with feedback. But it's one of those things where even if, like I said, even if you think it sucks, Eric's still going to come through and make a really, really cool image for you to look at visually. And that's one of the things I took away from his artwork and his style is that I wanted to draw stuff that made a flow through the page no matter what you thought of the story and no matter what, you know, you'll be like, well, you know, I like his stuff. It's not the greatest stuff in the world, and you can't remember half of it because the story doesn't stick for Eric's work. But yet he's so popular because of the fact that the book is, it's a quick, fun, hard, extreme ride. And the reason for that is because of the fact that he gets in there, tells the story he wants to tell, and gets out. And it's such a quick read that most people don't remember what's going on with it. And I like the fact that you can go in and get that quick escape from those type of books. And I want books like that. You know, as far as having a smooth ride where you get through them, they read well, and you show up and you go home. You show up, you enjoy, and you go home. Now, a lot of places in his storylines don't have a lot of depth to them, but artistic, you know, story-wise, but artistically, he always brings it. I've never seen a Savage Dragon book that I didn't like that he didn't draw. It's just something I resonate with because of the animated style that I like. And, you know, everybody's got artists like that they like, and that's cool. I'm fine with that. Go for it. I'm going to let that set for just a second while I move on with this other. I'm going to get these, the badge and stuff, and I'm going to go gold with it, not silver. So I'm doing that on purpose, but so don't freak out about that. But yeah. But anyway, I dig that because of the fact that whenever you get into those kind of books, they will totally blow your mind as far as the concept itself, if that makes sense. And if a book can hook you that heavy, then it needs to have the respect it gets. I'm going to go in with this one on the tie too, just to get that out there. Make it a little different color. But yeah, I really enjoyed the books and the dynamic side of it because of the fact that when I walked away from it, my stuff, as you can see here with this one, it's dynamic, even though it may not tell the story of what it is. You know something's going on because Dragon's already tore up. You know, that's Action Comics in motion, and that's the best thing that you can take away from someone like Eric Larson is and say what the, you know, what the whatever, as politely as we're going to keep it G-rated, but you know, what the whatever, because this is going on, and it's like, who's he fighting? Where's it going? Those kind of questions pop into your head, and the reason for that is because he makes you have that impulse from the moment you open a page. It's boom, there's a shot, boom, there's a shot, boom, there's a shot. Even with the simple stuff, and even with talking heads, he's really good at that too, because he uses such heavy body language on them to where they can't help but respond accordingly, which is awesome. Now I'm going in with a YG03 here, and I'm going to put in a little bit of a richer color throughout his skin here to kind of tone him up just a little bit. And I'm not going to go everywhere. I'm just going to kind of do, you know, like I call the Venom thing. The reason I do that is because I want to add some depth and complexion, you know, some contrast in his complexion to his face. And anyway, we'll get back to that. But yeah, I just enjoy this character. He's one of my favorites. And a lot of people disagree with, you know, whether he should be a comic book or not. And I'm a total fan of Eric's. And whether you like the Dragon or not, you know, I actually hated the cartoon, believe it or not. I really did. I hated that cartoon. I thought it didn't do the comic justice, and the way they did it, it was so quick. But then later on, I became a huge fan of it. And I'll tell you why, because of the same reason I like the comic book. After I realized and did a case study on it and realized what I was looking at was an animated full stream reflection of the original comic content, I was like, this is one note, man. I mean, it's 20 minutes of them running around and blah, blah, blah. And I just hated it. Thought it was totally flat. And then I went back and read the comic books in this study and compared. And then I watched the cartoons in comparison to the comic book. They matched it up 100%. But so many people hated the cartoon because of the fact that it was one note and it wasn't entertaining. They said it was like watching a kid's cartoon instead of watching, you know, like you would get when you were 5 years old, those one note, you know, lesson of the day type cartoons. And you would get one note out of it and it wouldn't entertain you because of the fact it couldn't hold your attention. Well, it was because you were fully engulfed in the concept because there was one note that you had to get. And once you got it, it's like, okay, I got it. Now your brain shut off on the whodunit and how's it working and what's going to happen next kind of thing. And then you start paying attention to all the other details, which is the animation, the voice actors, the storytelling, the pacing, all of that. And you start to break it down if you're analytical about it and you are used to something like, you know, a high-end show like Lost, and then, or Law and Order or something, you know, that makes you think, and then goes into something like that and something that'll take you out of the illusion, because that's called breaking the illusion. You know, and I discovered that the comics do the same thing. But artistically, the reason the dude is so popular is because of the artwork, not the stories. I mean, Savage Dragon is a one-note character, plain and simple, and I totally agree with that. But Spider-Man wasn't, and after Todd McFarlane left, Eric took over, and I tell you, man, it blew up. And it wasn't just the fame of the book that did it. Yes, Todd planted a seed for great momentum there, but when Eric took over artistically, he had one of my favorite appearances of Beast from the X-Men as a guest star in that Spider-Man comic book. It was Spider-Man number 15, right after the Sub-City storyline with Morbius and Todd left. There was this huge thing there where it was a wonderful setup for Spider-Man and Beast to run around for a little bit. And when they brought that in and Eric did that on, he did the work and put it out on the page, man, it was one of the best Beasts that I've ever seen. Beast was jumping around and active instead of hanging from something like he did in every X-Men cartoon or doing that one frog pounce that he does. He was actually fighting in the comic. And that was just phenomenal to me, totally mind-blowing when that book came out. And I like that book even better than a couple of the McFarlane Spider-Mans, which I love. But that's still one of my favorite comic books to this day. So when you guys get in there and think about that, start studying artists. So, the best tidbit I can give you from this is I'm going into a lime green right now with a G21. And the best tip I can give you guys, if you're wanting to do anything in your life, not just artwork or, comics or whatever specifically to this topic, but anything you want to do that resonates with you, go in and find out what is going on and makes those guys that are doing it already tick so hard. Do a case study. I never see anybody practice case studies in music or in business. Do case studies, find out what's going on. But yet movies and animation and comic books, artists do these kind of case studies all the time. I wish more publishers did case studies so they could find out what books are going to sell instead of just throwing stuff out there on a whim. I wish they would do them in advance and kind of do case studies, but they don't. So, that's where indies differ, because we pay attention to our fans and we're more open to get suggestions so that we don't throw ourselves under the bus and we keep our jobs. But I see so many characters like in Marvel and DC getting thrown under the bus because they're left in limbo because they're not fitting into the movie cinematic universe. You know what I mean? And now, no, I'm not making a smooth transition to bust on, the movies. I'm not going there. But what I'm saying is, in comics in general, as well as in business, which I'm very well into as well, we have to think about the case study and start moving that up. Start doing case studies of your favorite artist. Stop doing, stop messing around with it and just copying them without realizing what you're wanting to be attracted to and what you're wanting to add into your art as the same element, whether it's business or comics or otherwise. Think about that one for a second, because TV shows do case studies. Most infomercial companies do case studies for all those workouts and, the business stuff and, the real estate things we used to see and all that. All those infomercials you see late at night when you're bored to death and watching and nothing else is on and your 3,000 channels of cable and you're sitting there watching an infomercial and you can't turn it off, or you switch on Home Shopping Network by accident and then you can't turn it off and it's 4 hours later and you're going, I haven't bought anything, but I can't turn it off. The reason is because of the fact that it's sorry, they do case studies to make that happen. So they know what these people are presenting, they know how to make them work, and they know what their audience wants. And they know how to hook you. And that's why whenever you're watching at Home Shopping Network, that's why you'll space out and 3 hours later you'll be whining about how you should have bought it when it runs out, because you don't stop watching till it's all gone because you're not going to buy it in the first place. So, hey Jim, glad you made it, man. Just grabbing a couple of browns here so we can get to work on this. Now, I'm going to go in with a dark brown on this belt because I want it to contrast all that gray. So, but yeah, it's just one of those things where people just don't think about that kind of stuff. So if you're an artist out there, or you're a business person, or you're whatever your creative mass is, go in and check it out. And yes, I said mass, which is in your brain. That is a technical term. You know, it's the mass between your ears. So go in, whatever your creative brain tells you to do, go in and study the stuff that people are doing around you that you want to learn about. Because what's going to end up happening is you're going to go in and you'll say, okay, I'm going to look at this. I love these comics. You know, for me, I love comics. Well, the first thing I did was I went off and said, why do I love this character or this artist? What is it about this book that I love so much? And I broke it down into a couple of categories of the writing, which was, like I said, one note, no, not that. Okay, we moved on from the writing. We've got the artwork. Yeah, I love the artwork. It sucks you right in, holds on to you, and doesn't let you out until the ride's over. Awesome. Need to do that. Well, then you have things coming out of it, like after you decide what you like about the artwork, you make notes on that and make study on it. And then once you get all that done, I'm grabbing another gray here, a C5. That's another cool gray. Once you have the idea and understanding of what you've got in front of you, with the case study of knowing what you're interested in from that project, you emulate that. You know, you come across and you say, okay, here's the deal. I want to know this, and I want to know that, and I want to know this. And, well, what do you like about the artwork if you like the artwork? Well, I like the way he draws, you know, dynamic figures. I like the way he puts them on the page, and there's always motion in the page. There's always this heavyweight character in the page. There's always a layering effect or a three-dimensional simulated effect on a 2D page, which is crazy. But Eric always draws at a heavy foreground, middle ground, and background, which is standard for comics. But the thing is, he puts the background is like way off in the distance. Even though if it's a 9,000 square foot warehouse, it's still going to look like it's 20,000 feet, because he's going to put the guy, you know, like this big, and then he's going to put this big headshot and shoulder in front of that, and then in the middle ground you'll see like Spider-Man swooping through. You know, so I'm just making stuff up here, but you'll see like Spider-Man swooping through mid ground, and he's like right in the middle. And that's the way it works. You know, you scale stuff up. And if that's what you like, then that's what you take away. Same thing with business. You go in and you say, okay, I like the way this guy, you know, this is $1 million man here. I'm not going to throw out any names for anybody or anything. You know, I don't want people posting a bunch of stuff and freaking out. But, you know, think of your favorite millionaire that you want to be like. I want to be like him when I grow up and be millions and millions of dollars into life. Well, that's cool. Do that, you know. Go off and emulate that and see what makes that person do what they do and where they're at and how they do it, and emulate it. But the problem is going to come in reality check here. Be well aware of the fact that when you do this, you're also going to have to put in the same work, the same drive, the same effort that these people do to make this happen. It doesn't happen just overnight. You know, how did they get to that point? How did Eric Larson know to draw stuff that way? Well, he put in hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and years of artwork. Lots and lots of practice, lots and lots of practice. And people are like, well, you know, I can get rich now. I know what he does. No, you can't unless you study. You can eventually. I'm not saying you can't, but you have to put in the work and be willing to make the sacrifices that he made to make that happen, to at least master that skill. And that's the reason those guys are untouchable. You know, Todd McFarlane is willing to do pretty much anything to keep his comic going. So there's a limit to what you'll do in comparison to what he'll do. So you got to think about that. Are you brave enough to take it full action and go as far and as extreme and as intensely deep as you need to? It's not just sitting down and making a comic book. It's not just sitting down and making a website. It's not just sitting down and writing a book. You have to know how to do it. You have to know what makes it cool. You have to make it approachable and marketable and sellable. And if you don't have that understanding, you will shoot yourself in the foot standing right there, and you go, I'm going to learn to shoot this gun. I'm going to take target practice. And guess what you're going to do? You're going to shoot yourself in the foot. Then you're going to be bouncing around, and you'll be 6 months behind even further because of the fact that you jumped the gun and you ended up tripping and shooting yourself in the leg. And while you're healing up, that guy that you're emulating and you think you understand goes off and makes another, $10 million or whatever, or, another 8,000 copies of a comic book that anybody else would sell go for 20, 30, 40, 50,000, which is unheard of anymore. So the average comic book sells about 10,000 copies or less. Spawn listed selling as one of the top comic books because it sells right up there with Batman, which is current because of the movies and stuff. So you have all that going on, and you get, in the 25 to 50 range right now. But Todd averages between 15 and 20,000 a month. But guess what? He's also making 350,000 plus in digital sales every month because he's also selling his comic digitally, which so many people say, well, I want to do that because, I got myself a comic book and I want to print it. Well, you want to print it, you go right ahead. I have nothing against print. I like print. I want print too. And I teach people all the time. It's not print versus digital, okay? That's the old way. That's the old way. It's not print versus digital. No matter if you like holding a comic book or whatever, if that's a fan approach, that's a fan approach. I'm talking from business. It's got to be print and digital. And if you don't do both, you're not going to make money. And that's pretty much with any business, whether you're writing a book or novel or comic or, whatever. If you're not going digital as well as print, you're dead in the water because print is a luxury, plain and simple. It is a luxury business, and it will not go away, I don't think, until it's outlawed by the governments around the globe for saving trees because we need to breathe. But other than that, I don't think it's going to go away because too many commercial farms are growing trees. Paper companies are supplying trees like Georgia Pacific. They've been well known for decades coming back and replanting trees on farms and things from where they harvest so that, in the next 50 years or so, by the time they restart the patch cut, they'll have trees there to cut down for paper. And we'll still be making air during the time. You know what I mean? So it's just a lost cause to think that digital doesn't play into business now. And you've got to take that into consideration when you're doing this, whether it's comics or otherwise. So you got to get with their current technology and get it done, even if you don't agree with it. I see people say all the time, I love holding comic books. It's about holding the comic book. That's fine. Get it in print. But if you're selling a comic book, get off your butt and get the daggum thing up online first as well, because those people that are supporting digital aren't buying your paper comics. I see it every day. But what do I know, right? So what do I know? But we'll leave that there, and we'll get back into this and finish it up because we've just about got this done for the day. And it's so good to be back in the afternoon, the evening with you guys. It's been a while since I've done one of these in the afternoon because I've been so busy knocking pages out trying to get this comic up and running for you guys and getting my web comics and my print comics done. I've got a few books, which I won't go into right now, coming out, and I'm just trying to finish up the final touches on them this week to get that done. But I had to come on this afternoon, had to get this up for you guys and show you what's going on. So we got that going. Now I'm going to add in just a little bit more green here because I don't want to smudge him out, but what I'm going to do is grab a darker one, which I do have right here. I have a yellow-green 9.5, which is a pale olive color, which is perfect for him because it gives him that reptilian look. and this is what I want for the shading. Whenever you go in for a shading on Savage Dragon, always use this kind of olive color, and this is a YG95. Again, it's an olive color. This is the way you color this guy in, because if you don't, it'll go too dark with the green and you'll get like a forest green kind of thing going on. And what will end up happening is you'll end up with him going way too dark, and it'll put him in a different color scheme, and it'll make it look like he walked out of a cartoon rather than a comic book. And you don't want that, especially with this character, because he looks really weird with that dark green on him. There's a forest green that a lot of people like to use, and it makes him look way weird. Yeah, that's a technical term, by the way. So don't do that. Stick with the color palette of what you know for the character, which he has a really light complexion, and he has this brown hue to him, which I really like, which comes from this olive green color. It's not a true brown like people like to go with. It's actually a yellow. It's a yellow, not a true green or brown, but a yellow. And that's what people don't get. So they'll throw down deep dark greens, or they'll throw in browns. They'll throw in golds. I've seen them throw in golds, and that's weird too, because that's too much orange, too much red by the color palette. But to each their own. They're going to do whatever they want to do anyway, but still, nonetheless, I just don't think it shows up in the color palette enough to really make it look like the dragon. Of course, like I said, everybody's going to do their own thing. But as far as picking up artistic styles from people, like I originally started talking about, to go back full circle on that for a second, man, do case studies. You guys do case studies. It doesn't matter who you're studying. It doesn't matter what niche you're in. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what your understanding of that is currently. Just break it down and say one simple question. What do I like about this? Break it down into each section of what you need to have it reflect, and study it. Is it this I like? No, it's okay. That doesn't work for me. Is it this I like? No. Okay, on to the next. Is it this I like? Yes, that's where it is. I like it. I like the style. I like his line weight. I like the coloring. I like the character concept. I hear that one a lot. And it can just be as simple as liking the dragon character. It really can. It really, really can. And I see that all the time. And people are like, well, I like that character. Well, then make a character that emulates that one. Don't go copy Eric's work, because his attorneys will have a fit. But, and the man's got to eat. He's got to pay for his house. So don't steal his character. That's rude. But check it out and see what you think. Give it a shot. If you're a writer and you want to be a better writer, and you've got people you want to emulate, or people you want to model, and people you want to position after, then go for it. That's what you got to do. But be prepared. Again, you're going to have to do the work that they do as well. Once you understand what they do, you've got to understand how long they do it. That's the next question you have to ask is, well, how long did it take him to get that? How long will it take me to get that? And if I do it, will I be close to his success, or close to reproducing that? You got to think about that kind of stuff too. So with that said, though, I'm going to shade in this tie, and then we're going to call it a day. Again, I'm back to that C5, going right over this blue. Kind of round things out here. Just like that. I'm going to go down here and get these pants just a little bit. But think about it. It works for any niche. It works for any market. It works for any talented subject that can be learned, which anything can be learned. You may have a natural aptitude to something and be better than other people. But, I tell my mechanic all the time, because he's like, I don't know how I got into this. I just love it. And I'm like, well, because he's remodeling my truck for me. which is a pet project for me. And they have the heavy equipment to do a lot of it that I can't do at home because of the fact that I just don't have, I just don't have a lift and all that stuff like a garage does. But anyway, as a side note there, but the point I'm making is that as all of that goes along, you have to say, how much work did this person put in? How do I go about doing that? How do I make that work? And then you have to say, what do they do every day? What's their daily routine? And if they're celebrities online, and have social media or whatever, you can go on and find out about that by following them. If they do something, you do something. If they do something, you do something. Now, don't go behind them and be creepy and be, a clone, like I mentioned. But it's okay to go in and say, if you draw every day, I'm going to draw every day. If you draw a card every day, I'm going to draw a card every day. If you draw a comic page every day, I'm going to draw a comic page. If you draw, sketch routines, practices, studies, that's what I'm going to do. And if you draw 1,000, I'm going to draw 1,200. If you draw 1,200, I'm going to draw 2,000. And, do what you got to do to make it happen, and then get stronger and beyond the level that they're at so that you can move into that point. But anyway, with that said, I'm going to park it off here right now. So you guys, we have this earth for a limited amount of time. It's a great party. I'm really digging it. I hope you are too. And thanks for hanging out with me. Let's leave it better for the next generation so that we can get up and say, wow, this is a great life. Just plain and simple. Make somebody smile, make somebody feel good. Tell somebody you love them, and make sure you do, because if you walk up to a stranger, it's going to be awkward. So I think it's going to be cool with everything going on. I've got the He-Man and Grayskull piece tomorrow, so you guys watch out for that. And then I've got some great new cards coming up, starting with a series for Captain America, the Android, Human Torch, and Namor, aka Submariner. I'm going to be doing the original Invaders, and I'm going to be doing that in a big piece. So you guys will get to dig on that. But anyway, for now, talk to you later.